just 50 new infections today and fewer yesterday. Rita, look, I'm sorry to keep harping on this, but what is it going to take to make people start thinking, hey, maybe it is time we can be let out of our homes?
Well, we've flattened the curve, but that doesn't seem to be enough now. It seems to be we have to wait for a vaccination, or we have to have 0 new cases. I thought the whole effort that we were launching here was not only to flatten the curve, make sure that we protect our hospitals and do not overwhelm them like we saw in Italy and parts of Spain, where there were literally more people needing hospital beds and respirators than that were available. So obviously the drastic actions we took were to avoid that happening in Australia. That's not going to happen in Australia. That's evident now. And yet we've set new goalposts, and I can understand why we want to minimise.
They haven't set new goalposts, Rita. They've hidden them. They've actually hidden the goalposts. I've got no idea now. The curve is flat. We've done that. The beds aren't full in the ICU units. We've done that. What's the goalpost? And they say, we won't tell you where we've put them. You have no idea. Yeah. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, there needs to be far greater transparency, and we are getting now consistently mixed advice. And I think people are entitled to ask, what are you basing this advice on? Because we've got the Chief Medical Officer for Australia telling us schools should open. That is perfectly safe and acceptable for them to reopen. And yet we've got the Chief Health Officer down here in Victoria saying no, it would be at unacceptable risk for schools to operate in term 2. So people are entitled to ask, how can you have 2 senior medical officials who are advising governments be on such at such odds?
It's just, look, honestly, yeah, but when you have a look at that reasoning, look, we can't risk having kids go to school because parents will mingle. Well, all you need to say is stagger the drop-off times, and we'll have teachers there. The child exits the car, if that's how it's done, and we will take it from there. The parent does not get out. Or if they walk to school, you leave them there and you don't mingle. You turn right back straight away. The teacher will do the rest. I mean, it's just, be practical, people. Be practical. What's wrong with that?
And have some faith in people that they will behave like adults. No one is going to be trying to put themselves or their children at risk. And if people do the wrong thing, and there will be people who do, a small minority, then you can remedy that. You can have sanctions for them. And we've seen plenty of sanctions being handed out all across the country. And we've got to
sure, a policeman outside every school, you know, there are plenty enough around them chasing off beaches. Let them stand outside of school and monitor this. You're so right. Hey, but listen, you know what it seems to me too, Rita? I don't know whether you've picked this up. This issue of, you know, let's start relaxing the bans a little bit, the ones that are most useless. For one, the first one to get rid of would be on elective surgery. The ban on elective surgery is ridiculous. We've got doctors and nurses sitting around waiting for ICU patients who've got coronavirus who aren't coming. And meanwhile, a lot of Australians who need elective surgery are sitting there at home in pain or discomfort or worry. Yes. They can't get it. The doctors are there, the beds are there, they can't get it. But it's becoming a left-right issue, all these bans. Left-right. The left seems to want more, and the right or conservatives say, well, we can afford to relax them. What's going on there?
And some of the characterisations of these arguments are so extreme and simplistic. It's either you want to protect people, or if you even question bans or restrictions that are illogical or perhaps should be lifted at some future date, then you're advocating for the mass slaughter of the elderly. It is just so over the top. There is no nuance at all. And you're right, the elective surgery issue is a real one. You've got people who are suffering needlessly, where there's empty hospital beds, there's plenty of medical professionals who could attend to them, and things like day surgery, surgeries that, you know, will only be a 1 or 2 night stay maximum, they're not occurring. And things like IVF, for example, all of that has been cancelled. So you've got people who it may be their last chance to have a child, and they can't go ahead with those procedures because there is a ban on elective surgery. And if you're going to have something like an egg collection or the processes that IVF go through, you can't do it. And we've got to, again, look at that cost. All of the costs that we seem to be looking at is number of infections and number of deaths, which are important. But what about the other costs, which are also significant?
Correct. Daniel Wild has joined us. Daniel Wild from the IPA. Look, yeah, I was just saying to Rita, it's becoming a left-right issue whether to lift the ban, some of the bans, the most extreme ones, or not. And I think there was a test of it this week when Gideon Rosner of the IPA, your IPA, did a video, it went on the ABC, said, look, maybe we should start relaxing the bans. The reaction there, what did that tell you about this left-right divide?
Well, that's right, Andrew, and the ABC have been the cheerleaders when it comes to arguing for shutdown. They've apparently had very little concern for jobs, for social interaction, for people's livelihoods. Now, all Gideon suggested, and all we've been saying at the IPA for a couple of weeks now, is we need to begin the process of winding back some of these shutdown measures. We know that some 70,000 Australians have lost their job every single day of this shutdown, and my concern is that we're heading towards a humanitarian crisis of biblical proportions that could far exceed the direct health consequences of the coronavirus. It's not just the jobs, Andrew. It's not being able to see your grandparents, not being able to see the family or friends, not being able to go to your community events or sporting events. People can deal with this for some weeks, maybe even a couple of months, but 6 months is not possible. And one of the concerning elements, Andrew, is there's not a lot of hope out there. People are losing hope. People are losing their optimism about the future. And that's why it's so important that we start to wind back these social isolation measures. We're reasonable. We're safe to do so, but we must start doing it now.
Look, I have to say, I am prepared to take the risk of having my son come to me at home and me give him a hug. And people say, oh, look, but if you get infected, you'll infect all these other people. I practice social distancing on everyone else. I don't touch anyone else. I'm very careful. Look at my little sanitizer here and all that kind of stuff. That is my risk, and I resent the government saying that I can't take it. Now, shopkeepers, Rita, are now seeing people who went mad in the panic buying now asking for refunds. Here is John Paul Drake. He's the director of South Australia's largest family-owned supermarket chain. This is great. Have a listen.
2020, the year of Glen 20, or the year of toilet paper. The scenes that everyone has seen with the toilet paper has been absolutely ridiculous. And I had my first customer yesterday who said he wanted to get a refund on 150 packets of 32-pack toilet paper and 150 units of 1 litre sanitizer. I told him that. That is the sort of person that is causing the problem in the whole country.
Shame on Sky for blurring that vision. That really gets me. Now, Rita, I don't usually approve of rudeness, but that lifted digit struck me as exactly the appropriate response.
Oh, yes, and it's a bit of instant karma that these people are now saddled with all these goods that nobody wants anymore. I noticed that toilet paper at my local supermarket was actually on special, which we didn't see for many weeks because the packets were so rare. And I guess the only consolation for that hoarder is that at least those 2 items don't go out of date. So he's got a supply perhaps for lifetime. But again, the mixed advice we're talking about earlier, we had the Chief Medical Officer for Australia come out and say hoarding is stupid, stop it. We had the Prime Minister say that. But then in Victoria, the Chief Health Officer advised people to have a 2-week supply.
And I tell you what, Daniel, he actually was right. He was actually a bit right because I don't want to line up there for my 2 tins of tuna when I want 10 because I like tuna. He was right.
Well, yeah, well, that's right, Andrew. And I think the response from the shop owner was perhaps a bit crass, but was certainly valid. One of the most disappointing parts of this whole episode, Andrew, was the people that were hoarding. There was never going to be a supply issue. The only reason there was because of the unfair, unreasonable, inconsiderate actions of a few.
Daniel Wild and Rita Panahi, thank you so much to you both.